tonight, and our first speaker is Dr. Jess Danielson. So welcome.
Thank you so much for organising tonight, and I know it's taken so much work. So can we have a round of applause for Sharon? I've called this very simply, Let's Talk About Menopause, because quite honestly I'm delighted that we are. I think for a long time there was a conspiracy of silence, sadly amongst women as well. My mum describes a fabulous incident about 20 years ago of walking into the staff room at work, having a fairly lurid hot flush, sweating buckets, and going, "Oh, I'm having a terrible hot flush. Do you get them?" to a friend of a similar age who responded, "Oh no, I wouldn't do something like that." So it is great. I think women are supporting women much more, and that's great to see. And it's lovely to see all of you here today willing to talk about it. So brilliant, great start. I am Jess Danielson. I'm a BMS menopause specialist. I'm working for the Devon Menopause Service, and I also work as a GP in Bideford. Just a few admin bits. The first is all these opinions, and I will try and state when something's an opinion from anecdotal experience and when something's based on evidence. Or it's based on national guidance, and I have no paid input and never have from any pharmaceutical private companies. So just for clarity, because I am going to recommend some products, but they're not paying me. I can't provide tailored advice to individuals, and that's really a legal thing, but I'm going to hang around afterwards, so if anyone's got questions that they feel shy to present in front of everyone, I'll lurk around like a bad smell at the end of the evening. Feel free to come have a chat. And finally, I know this is a bit daft because the event is being filmed, but if we can be respectful of everyone present, if views are being expressed, or if anyone's got any concerns. I know confidentiality, if you're being videoed, is a bit of a nonsense person. That's lovely. So, what am I hoping to cover? What does menopause mean? Why does it matter? I'm going to talk a bit about HRT, because I'm good at the medicine stuff. There are people here today who are much better at the lifestyle and more of the things that you can do yourself for your health. And so I'm not going to cover that very much. The irony being, that's probably the most important bit. HRT is a very small part of your perimenopausal and menopausal health, but it's the bit I'm good at, so I'll do that and leave that to everyone else. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those prescribed alternatives to HRT, and importantly, we'll have a chance to ask questions. And as I say, if we run out of time, I am going to hang around afterwards. I've left some placebos, so there's no oestrogen in any of those products, so feel free to have a play. There's a gel there. There's the new couple of years old oestrogen spray as well, so feel free to have a play. I'll have a little spray for those later on if you fancy it. And I've left my favourite lubricant over there, made by a company called Yes, Yes, Yes. It's excellent. It's matched to the pH of your vagina. It's incredibly good. It's just the best product available on the market. They are not paying me, but it's great. So there's absolutely heaps of it over there. There's more where that came from if you want it. Help yourself, ladies. So, definitions. So, menopause is a moment, and it's describing that moment that is 1 year after your final menstrual period. And the average age for that moment to happen is 51 in the UK. Premature ovarian insufficiency is when that menopause happens under the age of 40. It's really important to pick these women up because they're at risk of having bone, heart and brain problems that women with a normal age of menopause won't have. So they really need HRT. It's not just a want, it's a need. We used to think that affected about 1 in 100 women, but latest evidence suggests it's closer to 3 to 4 in 100. So actually it's pretty common, and it's something I see in general practice quite a lot. Perimenopause, which I think people are much more aware of now, is that period that covers the time when your symptoms start up until when menopause occurs and beyond. Now, weirdly, those perimenopausal symptoms can start rarely as early as your late 30s, even if your menopause actually happens at 51. Now, that is rare, and the median age, the average age for symptoms to start, is actually 47, and they last on average about 4 to 7 years. Why do I care about menopause? I care because it has a really profound effect on women. 4 out of 5 of women experience symptoms at menopause, and most find the symptoms more severe than they were expecting. Most women experience an average of 7 symptoms. And that the BMS National Survey in 2016, which was the last biggie, said that 1/3 of women report issues at work, which is so sad. Because if you think about it, when you're approaching late 40s, 50s, you're probably top of your game at work, and suddenly you hit with this. 1/3 reported issues with social life, half with their sex life, half with their home life, and very sadly, half did not approach a healthcare professional about it. I actually think things have improved since 2016. I think there has been raised awareness through a few celebrity causes as well, which I think mostly have been for the good, although there's some dubious science going on there as well, but mostly it's great to see women talking about it. How do we diagnose it? Symptoms are key. There is no menopause blood test. If we think you're one of those women who may be having the menopause prematurely, so your periods have stopped or become a bit scanty before the age of 40, the blood test can help to support that diagnosis. So we might offer it to you, but really symptoms are everything. Women will tell me they're perimenopausal because they tick every box. There is this formal, very medical-looking scale that can be used. I think what's more user-friendly is the apps. The Balance app is one of them. There's the Flow app, the Clue app. All of these apps can help you have a little look and track your symptoms to see what patterns you recognise. I've also put a few leaflets with symptom tables on the table that can help to guide you when you go to an appointment to discuss the possibility of HRT. But yeah, there's no diagnostic test as such. Rock My Menopause is the patient-facing arm of a society called the Primary Care Women's Health Society. And if you Google Rock My Menopause, it's the first hit that will come up. And they're brilliant. Evidence-based information, absolutely no junk in there, and loads of really useful patient information leaflets. So have a little look. Symptoms. Now, we used to say just a couple of hot flushes. But we know that's not the case now. Yes, most women do experience hot flushes and night sweats. And the hot flushes are not just feeling a little bit hot at night and having to stick a leg out of the duvet. These are drenching. You'll have to change your pyjamas. And as you can understand, as you can imagine, that horribly disrupts your sleep. However, I find that what distresses women the most is the psychological symptoms, the brain fog, not feeling they're on the top of their game at work. I have so many women saying the exact sentence, "I just don't feel myself," which is heartbreaking. It's that loss of your sense of yourself. They describe being inexplicably irritable with family and everything just going wrong, a tearfulness on the cut of nothing, having a really labile mood when they used to be quite chilled out. Bladder and vaginal symptoms, recurrent water infections. A lot of them will notice vaginal dryness. Sex might be really uncomfortable. They might even bleed after sex. Sexual problems are not just discomfort, but a lot of women find they don't get any pleasure from sex anymore. They lubricate less and they may lose the ability to orgasm. Other. I'll do head to toe, shall I? It's such fun. So you might find that you're losing hair where you liked having the hair, and gaining hair where you do not want the hair. So a lot of women find their skin is unbearably itchy, and that's because you lose 30% of your skin volume within 5 years of your last period. So that is rapid skin aging, something that men don't experience, and a lot of women experience that as furious itching. Palpitations, one of the most common age to present in A&E with palpitations is in 45 to 55. That's no coincidence. So palpitation, joint aches. 50% of women get unexplained joint pain with no sign of arthritis on x-rays and examination. I'm really selling it, aren't I? Okay. And there are also some weird things. IBS gets worse. Some women get tinnitus when they never had it before. So just one of these symptoms obviously wouldn't scream menopause, but if you're putting that whole picture together and going, God, that's me, and that could be what's going on. And you might have all of those other things in the absence of the hot flushes and night sweats, so you might not have immediately pinned it on being perimenopause. So the benefits of HRT. Davina assures me that you take one tablet and you immediately look like this. Bang. So, but so far in my practice, I haven't found that's the case. However, HRT, we can treat all of these symptoms separately, clearly. But HRT, because it replaces what's missing, does, when you can use it, do the whole job, if you like. It's not a magic bullet. It doesn't reverse aging, and I think some of the claims about HRT are overblown, but the vast majority of women who start on it just feel a bit better, which is a win. Importantly, and certainly in those premature ovarian insufficiency patients, those premature menopause patients, HRT is essential for them to protect their bones, protect them from heart disease, and prevent dementia. But even for women with a normal age of menopause, HRT is actually a really effective treatment for osteoporosis, and one of the choices, full stop, for treatment of that condition. And it also reduces your risk of heart disease significantly.
Are there any risks? There are bothersome risks. Your breasts will hurt initially. That does tend to calm down, but they can be swollen and sore for a month or two after starting and a month or two after every dose increase. Irregular bleeding is really annoying, particularly if your bleeding had stopped and you're finally through it. Irregular bleeding can be a feature for the first 6 months after starting HRT and for every 3 months after changing your dose or changing the type. So that's a bit of a bother as well. Those are the bothersome things. What about serious side effects? Blood clots, if you take HRT by mouth, there is a small increased risk. But if you take it through the skin, it doesn't increase your risk over your baseline. Stroke is increased if you start HRT over the age of 60 and you take it by mouth, but not if you're using it through the skin again. However, when women come in to talk to me, they're not about HRT, they're not worried about the risk of clots, they're worried about breast cancer. And I think it is terrifically important to put those risks into context. Does HRT increase your risk of breast cancer? Yes, but let's compare it to some of the other risks that we might be exposing our body to. So, at the age 50 to 59, which is the average age we're starting women on HRT, over the next 5 years, there'll be 23 cases per 1,000 women of breast cancer. If you add in estrogen-only HRT, which is something we can give if you don't have a womb, it actually slightly reduces the breast cancer risk. If you use combined HRT for women still with a womb, it increases it by 4 cases. 2 units a day of alcohol, which is quite honestly a modest glass of wine, increases it by 5 cases. Smoking by 3, obesity by 20 to 30 cases, and exercising reduces your risk of breast cancer by 7 cases. So I think, again, we're going to talk a lot more about lifestyle and what you can do for yourself, but I think this reminds us. There was a wonderful speaker at the last British Menopause Society conference who said that, yes, your genetics, what's going to happen to you, that will load the gun, but your lifestyle will fire it. So I think we must not forget the power we have over our health. Time's also important. There's actually no increased risk in breast cancer if you take HRT for less than 12 months. So for those women worried about taking it, you could always try a trial of 3 months because you're not exposing yourself to any risk of breast cancer. See if it makes a difference to your quality of life, and you can always stop it if it doesn't and you haven't increased that risk. Any reasons why you absolutely can't have it? Very few. Now, this is actually a bit of a controversial one, active breast cancer or history of breast cancer. The studies, unfortunately, that looked at whether it was safe or not to take HRT of breast cancer were terminated early. There were 3 studies, and they were all terminated in the early noughties. And the reason was that 1 of the 3 showed an increased risk of recurrence of breast cancer in the women that were on the treatment arm of that trial. And it was felt that that risk was so great, they had to terminate all trials. So the sad thing is that meant that we don't actually have any reliable data because the trials never went through to completion. The accepted position is that we do not give HRT systemically, i.e. by tablet or patch or gel, to women who have had breast cancer. It is still worth the discussion about HRT because quality of life is always key. And breast cancer is not just one disease. You probably know that some breast cancers are responsive to hormones and some are not. So the picture is not entirely clear, but this is not a decision that your GP would make. This would have to be run by a menopause specialist, an oncologist, and the whole team. But sometimes quality of life comes first. And I think that is a difficult conversation, one that needs to be had for those patients. For those affected by breast cancer, there are some leaflets about things that you can do specifically for those women with breast cancer, which I have left on the table over there. Estrogen, unfortunately, has to be dealt with by your liver. So if you have really, really serious liver disease, you cannot have HRT. Unexplained bleeding from the vagina, you can have the HRT, we just need to find out what the bleeding is first. And family history, I've put a question mark. A lot of people don't even approach GPs about family history, about HRT, because they're worried about their family history of breast cancer. Unless you have more than one relative who had breast cancer over the age of 40, actually your risk is the same as anyone else because breast cancer is so common, 1 in 7 women get it. So even if you think, I can't have breast cancer I can't have HRT because there's breast cancer in my family, just check because it could be that your family history isn't worrying to us at all and your risk is pretty much close to baseline. I'm only going to touch on this because I'm not the expert, but there are things you can do with diet. There are phytoestrogens, which are estrogen-like compounds in plants that you can eat, but this is going to be covered later. You can avoid hot flush triggers, which is essentially anything that brings you joy. so caffeine, alcohol, spicy food. Intense exercise is a bit of a controversial one. Some people say that HIIT and Tabata, those things where you're really sweating and then stopping, they're really sweating. There is weak evidence that makes hot flushes worse, but to be honest, I think exercise of any kind is probably a good thing. Smoking can make hot flush experiences worse as well. Again, exercise, wonderful, is going to be covered later, but for your heart and bone, there's nothing like it. And actually, you probably saw in the mainstream media this week, there's further evidence published that it prevents all kinds of cancer. Sorry, not prevents, but reduces the risks of all kinds of cancers, not just breast, that we've known for some time. Controlling your weight can help with a lot of these symptoms, and I love this. Make sure you get 7 hours sleep. So yeah, do that. Okay. As I say, HRT is the gold standard, and the majority of women can take modern HRT. It relieves your symptoms, improves your quality of life, and it, as I say, can help with your bone health, your heart health, and your brain health too. It contains 2 hormones if you have a womb. The estrogen is the bit that is actually good for you and feels good. The progesterone is just there to protect your womb. If you give someone estrogen and they've got a womb and you don't try and give something to push against it, the lining of the womb gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that patient will bleed and bleed and bleed. But more importantly, if you just keep making a tissue grow, eventually it's going to grow out of control and it can become cancerous. So that's why we have to stick progesterone in with it. It's a shame, because progesterone is the hormone that gives you PMS. Yay! Multiple different options for HRT, loads of different formulations, and I'll go through a few of them. But it's not a one-size-fits-all medication. You can now get an HRT prepayment certificate, and I'd recommend getting one. That saves you a fortune over the course of a year. What might it look like? If you take it through the skin, it comes as a gel, a spray, a patch, or a little mini patch. You can take it by pill, which is really convenient for some women. I think it's become very trendy to use HRT through the skin for everyone. But actually, if you are a low-risk woman who we don't think is at high risk of having a clot anyway, take it by mouth. It's really convenient, and you don't risk not absorbing it. 1 in 5 women have absorption issues with HRT through the skin, so it's not a perfect drug. Don't forget oral. And the progesterone, you can take it as a tablet, it can be stuck in a patch, or you can even have a coil put in to protect your womb, so all sorts of options. Testosterone is a really hot topic, and I get asked about it a lot in clinic. I don't think it's very good. Testosterone, over the course of your life, goes down smoothly. It's not like estrogen that suddenly drops down at menopause. Your testosterone will be dropping from about the age of 19, which I think, if you all remember being 19, you can picture that that's the case. It can help. In some trials, there was weak evidence that it performed slightly better than the placebo part of the trial, the water tablets. It can help in some post-menopausal women, not perimenopausal women. There was no effect. For libido alone, nothing else. So any claims that testosterone makes you more energetic, helps with muscle health, energy, thinking, fatigue, anything else, not backed up by evidence. So it's absolutely fine to try it if libido is, if you're post-menopausal, so your periods have stopped, and despite the fact you're on HRT and everything's okay down below, and you're comfortable, you haven't got any vaginal dryness, and your relationship's okay, then it's worth trying testosterone. But I hate this concept that libido in women is something that can be switched on and off by testosterone, because it's just too simple. Guess what the biggest predictor for poor libido in women is consistently in all trials? So depressing, this. Being in a long-term relationship. Yeah, so there's a little bleak thought for you. Okay. So for the bladder and vagina symptoms, vaginal dryness, irritation, inflammation, bleeding, etc., 1/4 of women who are taking HRT through the system, either through a tablet or through the skin, still get symptoms down below. And the good news is you can treat that additionally. You can pop estrogen directly into the area. And it delivers really minimal absorption into the rest of your body, so that we can even give it to people who've had breast cancer, which is great, because this is a really common symptom after breast cancer treatment. And using it at a decent dose for an entire year is the equivalent of swallowing 1 tablet of HRT, so very low system absorption. So yeah, don't forget the downstairs. I also really recommend lubricants and vaginal moisturizers. It's so funny, if any other part of your skin was dry, you would moisturize it. But we forget that if our vaginas are dry, we can moisturize them too. So again, the Yes Company does a lovely vaginal moisturizer. It's in the purple packet over there. Do grab a few, it'll change your life. So, there are some non-hormonal alternatives, which you may want to try just because you don't fancy HRT, or it may be the best option available to you because HRT might not be a good idea. Some antidepressants and bladder drugs can help with the hot flushes. There's a new drug called Veoza, or fezolinetant, which works on the brain, and the great thing about it is it doesn't really have any side effects at all and reduces the hot flushes very significantly. It hasn't been approved by the NHS yet, but I'm hoping that once they've done the trials in women, because the big group that will love this is women who've had breast cancer. They're currently trialling it in those women, and I have no doubt it will be successful, so that should be available soon, which is wonderful. CBT, and I'm not going to say too much about this, but our wonderful local therapists now do specific menopause CBT. Holistic treatments can be really valuable and can make you feel more powerful that you are taking control of those symptoms. Things like acupuncture, aromatherapy, increasing evidence for cold water swimming for managing those hot flushes and night sweats. And also, it's fun. Yoga, interestingly, there are plenty of trials that show that women, even though it didn't decrease their hot flushes, they felt better about them. So again, so much is about your whole well-being, and so yoga's great for that. Herbal medications, it's really tricky because you never really know what you're buying. There is regulation of the herbal industry, and it's worth getting regulated herbs if you go for it. When it comes to herbal medications and vitamins, the evidence isn't great. Big doses of vitamin E can help with flushes in some trials. Magnesium as glycinate, which the body finds easier to absorb, is quite good for sleep, so worth thinking about if sleep's a problem. Black cohosh and red clover, they can be helpful, but there's worries about interactions with other drugs. We haven't proven it's safe after breast cancer, and it can have slightly odd and unpredictable liver reactions, so they're not completely innocuous and safe, so worth thinking about. Something that really bothers me is these vitamin combinations that are marketed that say, this is the perfect combination of vitamins after the menopause. Absolutely no evidence for any of it. In fact, the best advice to give you about vitamins is try a single supplement for 3 months, so something that a pure supplement for 3 months, see if there's any difference, and then try another one. Because if you do get benefit from a mixture of vitamins, they're very expensive. Which one actually worked? Which one made you feel good? You don't know. So one at a time, give it a good 3-month trial, and bin it if it doesn't help. I've made this all sound terrifically depressing, but actually, I did a talk recently, and it was to a really mixed age group, and there was a lady in her, I think probably 70s, who stood up at the end and went, I just want to say, girls, that it does end, and then everything's great again. And I thought that was such a good way for to finish. So yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. You are going to be free from the tyranny of hormones at last. If you have endometriosis, your menopause is the cure. 10% of women have endometriosis. 50% of women with epilepsy have flare-ups monthly. So, and you know, again, this is the cure. So it's not, also, the leading cause of iron deficiency anemia in women under 50 is your period. So, you know, we are not, it is not all bad, actually. Does anyone watch Fleabag? Yeah. Did anyone see that lovely monologue by Kristen Scott Thomas, where she was like, I'm free. And I think that's how I'm going to finish, because you will be free, so it's all good. Right, any questions? That's a really good question. There is no arbitrary length of time to take HRT. The recommendation from NICE is that once you have been symptom-free for 2 years, so once you've felt good for 2 years on it, you can start to wean the dose down. The nice thing about taking it through the skin is that you can wean it down in a very controlled way, so 6 months on a slightly lower dose and another 6 months. But yeah, they say make sure you're symptom-free for 2 years before you consider dropping. Your body, I think there's a big fear that you're delaying the menopause, you're delaying the inevitable by taking HRT. But what you're actually doing is keeping your hormones static. That menopause is still happening. Your ovaries are still adjusting to going to sleep, essentially. It's still happening. You're not masking it. But what you're doing is taking control over the symptoms. So rather than just tolerating the hormones doing this, which makes you feel awful, you get control of how slowly you wean off them. And our bodies are really good at adapting. We happily tolerate that drop in estrogen once our bodies are used to it. But HRT helps you take control of that drop down instead of it being really erratic. Any other questions? I'm also happy afterwards, but...
Is there any link between PMT symptoms and severity of perimenopause?
Yes. Patients with several things actually. Patients with PMT, it tends to worsen dramatically around perimenopause, number one. Also, PMT is caused by that progesterone hormone. So those patients often find that, unfortunately, the progestogen part of the HRT is a real bugger for them. And we often find that they do better on the slightly more natural progestogens, things like micronized progesterone or utrogestin, that some of you may, but your GP will talk you through the options. But yeah, they tend to do better on the gentler progestogens. But you're right, there is a link between bad PMT and a tricky time in the perimenopause, should we say? Sorry, was there a question?
Yes, I have a young male doctor who's told me categorically that I don't have perimenopause because I don't have hot flashes. I come from an amazing female doctor in Bristol who is absolutely phenomenal and knew a lot about it. And
Yeah.
the gentleman has given me all the information that you have tonight.
Yeah.
What is this Devon menopause service? How does one access it?
Yes.
What does one do if you've got rubbish?
This is new. So there was women's. This is all very politics and boring. There was some Women's Health Hub funding that came down to each ICB, which is the kind of the organisational structure of Devon's NHS. And that was finally a bit of it spent last year on menopause care. Now, at the moment, frustratingly, it's an advice and guidance service. What that means is if their GP has a patient in front of them and they're not quite sure how to manage it, they can write to us and we will tell them how to do so. We are hoping, so far, the service has been a success. What I hope that means is it will be expanded so that we can offer face-to-face appointments, so a GP can refer to, so that we can actually see those patients. At the moment, it is just an advice service, but if you're, and it sounds like you have done, which is great, but if you're ever not happy with the view that you have got from a GP, with the NHS charters is very clear that we are all entitled to a second opinion. That's at the GP level, but also in secondary care. If you ever are referred to a consultant, you're like, that doesn't feel right, you are entitled to a second opinion. So don't be afraid to ask for one.
So would that be within the same practice?
Yep.
I would like to see a different doctor.
Absolutely, yeah. We are trying to create the role of a menopause champion across the ICB for each practice, so there's a go-to person, but it's slow work. And I think a lot of GPs of a certain age, through no fault of their own, I would say, lived through that early noughties HRT scare. My mum was congratulated by her GP for not taking HRT. Because oh yeah, it gives you cancer, done. So I think a lot of GPs have lived through that, and I think it's very hard for them to get out of the mindset that actually it doesn't. Yeah, but we always ask for a second opinion. Any other questions?
You start losing estrogen from the brain after the ovaries.
Yeah,
They're like going through it again. I know you don't get a second wind.
yeah.
But that's what seems to be. I've seen people go through it again and I think maybe you can lose it from the brain.
You have estrogen receptors throughout your body. It's incredible, including in the skin. Most concentrated, frustratingly, in the face and genitals. That's where there's most estrogen receptors in the skin, which is why our faces age so quickly at menopause. Delightful. But yeah, and there are loads of estrogen receptors in women's brains, hence those horrible symptoms of brain fog, irritability, etc. And I think there is I said that once you've been symptom-free for 2 years, you can consider going off. Some women never become symptom-free. I've got a few women who are in their late 70s who have decided to remain on HRT. They have accepted that we don't really know much about the risk because there aren't really many decent studies of using HRT in women of that age. But I think it's got to be a shared discussion with you and your GP, and if you're both happy to shoulder those risks, it's reasonable to continue. So if you have felt that if you're dropping the estrogen, it's all just coming straight back, keep going. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. You said about osteoporosis risk, and if you don't get HRT, what level of vitamin D or calcium should you take to help prevent osteoporosis?
Really, really good question. I think it will depend on your personal risk factors, so it's worth discussing that with your GP, because actually the vitamin D dose that you need is very personal. What I would say is that studies have demonstrated that vitamin D in combination with calcium is much better at preventing fractures than vitamin D alone. So it very much depends on your individual risk, so that would be something to discuss with your GP. The other thing that you can do to get a ballpark look at your bone risk is if you go to the Royal Osteoporosis Society's website, there is a bone sort of risk calculator on it that is really, really user-friendly. And again, it can really help to inform conversations with your GP. You can say, look, I've had a look at my bone risk and it's this. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out the Royal Osteoporosis Society, and it's full of really patient-friendly information. They're wonderful. Anything else? I am going to hang around afterwards, so if there are any questions about vaginas or anything, I will be there and I'll keep it to myself. Thank you so much for having me.